The scent of antiseptic always gave Sunghoon a headache, but today it felt like it was suffocating him. He leaned against the polished marble pillars of Cheongdam International Hospital reception desk. For the last 48 hours, he hadn't slept. His mind kept drifting back through the stacks of oncology reports and advanced cell therapy trials he'd been reviewing, futile attempts to find a miracle for his father's aggressive lung cancer. The doctors had finally stopped talking about treatment and started talking about time. Sunghoon rubbed his temples, the weight of the diagnosis pressing heavily against his chest as he stared aimlessly at the sterile white floor, trying to process a reality where his father was no longer around. Then, through the heavy silence of the VIP wing, he heard the voice. "Mom, look." Nurse Choi said, "I can wait here." It wasn't the boy's voice that made Sunghoon stiffen. It was the rhythm, the exact quiet cadence. Sunghoon turned slowly, his black overcoat heavy against his frame, and looked down. The boy couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. He wore a miniature black coat, a carbon copy of Sunghoon's own tailored wardrobe, right down to the high turtleneck. But it was the face. The sharp, aristocratic jawline, the distinct curve of the brow, and most terrifyingly, the eyes. Those eyes. A piercing, brilliant, unnatural hue that caught the harsh fluorescent lights of the clinic. They were the eyes Sunghoon saw every single morning in the mirror. Sunghoon dropped to one knee, ignoring the damp chill of the floor. His breath caught in his throat as he leveled his gaze with the child. Up close, the resemblance wasn't just striking, it was a genetic mirror. "What's your name, kiddo?" Sunghoon asked, his voice cracking slightly, stripping away his usual boardroom authority. The boy blinked, those luminous eyes locking onto Sunghoon's with an eerie, calm intelligence. "Leo," he whispered, tilting his head. "Are you the man from the picture in Mom's book?" Before Sunghoon could process the question, a sharp gasp cut through the ambient hum of the hospital. "Leo, get away from him." Sunghoon looked up. Standing a few paces back, a tablet clutching to her chest like a shield, was Dr. Clara Vance, so the tag said. Her hair was different, woven into long, intricate braids that fell past her shoulders, and she wore the blue scrubs and white coat of a pediatric resident. But there was no mistaking her. 5 years ago, Clara had been his right hand. She knew his schedules, his secrets, his inner workings better than anyone alive. And then, on a Tuesday morning, her desk was empty. No resignation letter. No phone call. No trace. Just a vanished life. Now, she stood frozen, her face drained of color, her mouth slightly open in absolute terror. "Clara?" Sunghoon said, rising to his full height. The sheer gravity of his presence seemed to make the bustling hospital corridor shrink around them. "You changed your name? What is this? What is going on?" Clara took a step backward, her eyes darting toward the security desk, then back to the boy, who was now looking between the two adults with growing confusion. "Sunghoon, please. You weren't supposed to be here. This isn't what you think." 5 years, Naden, Sunghoon said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a fierce, dangerous whisper. 5 years I thought you were dead. I spent millions looking for you. And now I find you in a clinic, with a child who possesses the one trait I thought died with my family's lineage. The tension between them was palpable, a suffocating field that even the passing nurses seemed to sense, glancing nervously at the wealthy benefactor intimidating their resident. Clara tightened her grip on the tablet, her knuckles turning white. "I left to protect him, Sunghoon. From your world. From what your family does to things they can't control." Look at his eyes, then at him. "You think the board would have let him live a normal life? They would have turned him into a corporate project before he learned to walk." Sunghoon looked back down at Leo. The boy didn't look afraid. He looked curious, watching Sunghoon with that same calculated focus Sunghoon used in negotiation rooms. The genetic legacy was undeniable, but so was the protective fury in Clara's eyes, the fierce, beautiful defiance that had drawn him to her in the first place. "He is a Vance," Clara said, her voice shaking but resolute. "He belongs to me. You didn't know about him then, and you don't get to know him now." The weight of his father's impending death, the looming threat of his uncle, and the sudden existence of his son crashed down on him all at once. For 5 years, the anger of her desertion had burned inside him, but seeing her now, the raw ache of his love for her surged right back to the surface, warring violently with his pride. He didn't just want a son. He wanted the woman who had torn his life apart by leaving. His expression fractured, the cold mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal the deep pain underneath. When he spoke, his voice wasn't just a threat, It was thick with a dangerous, quiet desperation. "You let me believe I was entirely alone in this world, Naden," he whispered, stepping close enough that she could feel the heat of his anger and the tremor in his breath. "My father is dying, and my family is tearing itself apart for the crown. I am facing a war, and you hid my son from me. You hid yourself from me." His voice broke at the last part. He adjusted the lapel of his coat, his jaw tight as he forced his composure back into place, though his eyes remained fiercely fixed on hers. "He has my blood, Naden. And whether you like it or not, you and Leo belong in the empire I am about to inherit. I won't let my family end in ashes. We can walk out of here together and settle this quietly in my office, or I can let my lawyers dismantle this hospital brick by brick until I bring you both home. Choose." It's Clara now. Her voice cut through the sterile air, sharp and desperate. She took a half step forward, shielding Leo further behind her scrubs. "It is Clara, Sunghoon. And I am not going anywhere with you." By now, the entire lobby had frozen in time. The rhythmic tapping of keyboards at the reception desk had stopped. Passing nurses stood still, chart folders pressed to their chests, and even the distant security guards were watching wide-eyed. Naden felt her 5 years of carefully constructed anonymity dismantling in real time, shattered by the mere presence of the man standing in front of her. Sunghoon didn't storm closer. He didn't yell. Instead, the terrifying, immovable posture of the Cha Group heir seemed to fracture completely. "Please," he whispered. The word was barely a breath, but it carried the weight of a collapse. Naden's chest tightened as she looked at his face. Tears were actively forming in his dark, striking eyes, catching the harsh clinic lights. In all the years she had managed his life, through hostile corporate takeovers and brutal family betrayals, she had never seen him look like this. He looked entirely broken. A tear escaped, tracking down Naden's own cheek. She bit her trembling lower lip, the fierce mask she wore starting to crack. "I can't," she choked out, her voice thick with her own unshed tears. "Sunghoon, I just can't." Before she could lose her nerve, or worse, give in to the desperate longing in his eyes, Naden grabbed Leo's small hand. She turned on her heel and practically fled down the corridor, her white coat billowing behind her as she vanished through the double doors of the pediatric ward. Sunghoon stood entirely still in the center of the frozen lobby, watching the space where they had just been. He didn't give chase. He didn't order his security detail to stop her. Slowly, he raised his right thumb and wiped his eyes, his expression hardening back into stone. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. He finally knew the truth. He wasn't alone. His father was fading, and his uncle was circling like a vulture, but Sunghoon now had a son, and the only woman he had ever loved was within his reach. He adjusted the heavy collar of his black overcoat, turned toward the hospital exit, and walked out into the rain. He had a war to win, and now he had the ultimate reason to win it. The rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Cha Group headquarters didn't wash the city clean. It just turned Seoul into a blurred, gray maze. Sunghoon sat behind his desk, the silence of the executive suite heavier than the storm outside. He hadn't changed out of his black overcoat. The wool was still damp, smelling faintly of the hospital lobby, faintly of antiseptic, and entirely of her. On the polished mahogany surface lay a single, freshly printed manila folder. It was thin, unacceptably thin for a 5-year gap. Secretary Kong stood at absolute attention across from him, his hands clasped behind his back, his head bowed just enough to signal deepest caution. The records were scrubbed with detailed accuracy, Director Cha. No bank accounts, no flight logs, no insurance claims under the name Clara Vance exist past the date of her disappearance. "And yet, she was standing right in front of me," Sunghoon said. His voice was too quiet, a flat line that made Kang's shoulders tense. "Explain the woman in the white coat." "She is registered as Dr. Clara Vance, a pediatric resident at Cheongdam International. Her credentials originate from a mid-tier medical program in London, but the transfer paperwork..." Kong hesitated, choosing his next words like he was walking through a minefield. "The transfer paperwork has a signature from an internal affiliate within our own foundation. Someone bypassed the standard background checks 5 years ago." Sunghoon's eyes narrowed, the silver-gray depths darkening. An internal affiliate. Someone inside his own house had opened the door for her to vanish, or worse, forced her through it. "The boy," Sunghoon murmured, the image of those bright, luminous eyes flashing behind his eyelids, stealing the air from his lungs. "What about the boy?" Born in London. For years and 8 months old. Registered under her original surname. There is no father listed on the birth certificate, sir. For years and 8 months. Sunghoon closed his eyes as the brutal, mathematical truth settled into his chest. When she never showed up at his office 5 years ago on that rainy Tuesday morning without a single word, she wasn't just abandoning their shared life. She was carrying his child. She had faced the morning sickness, the doctor's appointments, the terror of labor, and the sleepless nights completely alone, disguised as a stranger in a foreign country. The anger that had sustained him for half a decade suddenly felt hollow, replaced by a raw, aching confusion.
Why?
He would have given her the world. He would have built an empire just to lay it at her feet. Shall I send the security detail to bring her in for questioning? Kong asked. Or notify the legal team to draft a custody injunction? No, Sunghoon commanded, his voice hardening as the corporate mask locked back over his fractured features. He stood up, fastening the single button of his suit jacket. We don't touch her. We don't alert her. If she thinks she's being hunted, she'll run again, and this time I won't find her. He walked over to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. I want a 24-hour detail on her. I want to know what she eats, when she sleeps, and who she speaks to. But more importantly, I want to see it myself. The neon sign of a 24-hour convenience store flickered across the street from a dilapidated brick apartment complex in the outskirts of the Mapo district. It was a far cry from the luxury high-rises of Cheongdam, a place where people came to blend into the background noise of the working class. Inside the tinted windows of his black sedan, Sunghoon watched. It was 11:42 p.m. when the bus finally hissed to a stop at the corner. Clara stepped off. Even from 50 yards away, Sunghoon's chest tightened. She looked exhausted. Her white residence coat was folded over her arm, her shoulders slumped under the weight of a cheap canvas tote bag. Her intricate braids were slightly loose, a few stray curls framing a face that looked pale under the yellow streetlights. She stopped at the convenience store, buying a single triangular gimbap and a small carton of milk. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look around with the casual ease of a normal citizen. Sunghoon noticed the subtle, hyper-vigilant twitch of her head, the way her eyes scanned the dark alleyways, the way her hand instinctively tightened on her bag when a car braked too loudly nearby. She wasn't just living. She was surviving. She was hiding. Sunghoon watched her navigate the cracked pavement and disappear into the stairwell of the apartment building. 10 minutes later, a dim light flickered on behind a window on the third floor. Through the sheer curtains, he saw her movement. She dropped her bag, but the exhaustion seemed to vanish the moment she stepped further into the room. A small shadow bounded into her arms. It was Leo. Sunghoon leaned forward, his forehead almost touching the cool glass of the car window. His breath fogged the view, and he quickly wiped it away with his sleeve, desperate not to lose a single frame of the scene. Clara lifted the boy, spinning him once despite her obvious fatigue. She pressed her face into his hair, her shoulders shaking slightly in what looked like a profound, silent relief. When she set him down, she kneeled, the exact same way Sunghoon had kneeled in the hospital lobby, and handed him a small plastic toy she must have kept in her pocket. Leo's face lit up. Even from this distance, Sunghoon could see the sharp, aristocratic tilt of the boy's chin as he laughed, a perfect imitation of the portraits hanging in the Cha family estate. The boy didn't look like a victim of a broken home. He looked loved. He looked protected by a wall of fierce, maternal devotion that Clara had sacrificed her entire identity to build. Sunghoon's hand gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. A violent conflict tore through him. He was furious that she had kept his son a secret, furious that she had relegated a prince of the Cha group to a cramped apartment in a forgotten neighborhood. But as he watched her gently wipe a smudge of dirt from Leo's cheek, the memory of her breaking down in the hospital lobby echoed in his mind. You think your board of directors would have let him live a normal life? They would have turned him into a corporate project before he even learned to walk. She hadn't run out of malice. She had run out of terror. Sunghoon leaned back against the headrest, closing his eyes as a heavy, dangerous resolve settled into his bones. His father was dying in a VIP suite, completely unaware that his legacy was breathing in a rundown apartment across the city. His uncle was sharpening his knives, ready to steal the chairmanship the moment the old man drew his last breath. If Sunghoon brought Clara and Leo into his world right now, he would be bringing them into a slaughterhouse. He opened his eyes, staring up at the lit window on the third floor. The light finally clicked off, plunging the room into darkness. Sleep well, Naden, Sunghoon whispered into the empty car. Because when I come to bring you home, I am going to make sure there is no one left in the city who can make you run. 3 days. Sunghoon gave himself 3 days before he moved. Not out of patience. Out of strategy. He needed to know exactly what he was walking back into before he walked into it. His lead investigator, Park Tae-won, had the full report on his desk by Wednesday morning. Sunghoon read it standing up. Dr. Clara Vance. Licensed under that name for 4 years. Pediatric residency at Cheongdam International. Rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Mapo, 3rd floor, corner unit. Paid her bills on time. No credit card debt. No social media presence. One emergency contact on file, a woman named Aunt B, untraceable beyond a disconnected number. No mention of Cha Sunghoon anywhere. Not even a ghost of him. He set the file down. Any additional information on the child? He said. Tae-won didn't flinch. Enrolled in a private kindergarten under the name Leo Vance. Teachers describe him as quiet, unusually focused. Advanced vocabulary. A pause. Silver gray eyes. The enrollment staff apparently asked if he wore contacts. Sunghoon walked to the window. Seoul stretched out below him, gray and wet and indifferent. 42 floors of Chaiwon Group headquarters, and the most important thing he learned this week was that his son had been asked about contact lenses. Pull back the surveillance, he said. All of it. Tae-won hesitated. Sir. She'll notice. She's been running for 5 years. She knows how to spot a tail. He turned from the window. I'll go myself. He found her on a Thursday. Not at the hospital. At the kindergarten. He hadn't planned it that way. He'd simply driven past the school just once, just to see, and there she was, standing at the gate in a gray coat, holding a juice box and a small backpack with a dinosaur on it. Sunghoon parked across the street and didn't get out. Leo came barreling through the gate at full speed and hit her at the hip. She laughed, a real one, the kind that bent her forward, and crouched to zip his jacket. He said something. She said something back. Then he grabbed her hand and they walked toward the bus stop, his small steps matching her longer ones. Sunghoon sat in the car for a long time after they turned the corner. He wasn't soft. He hadn't built Chaiwon's next generation on sentimentality. But watching her walk away with his son's hand in hers, calm and ordinary, like it was the most natural thing in the world, something in his chest pulled hard in a direction he hadn't felt in 5 years. He got out of the car. She heard him before she saw him. The bus stop was empty, except for them. Leo was crouched on the pavement, examining a beetle with the concentration of a scientist. Clara had her phone out, pretending to read something, when the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She turned. Sunghoon was standing 10 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, no security detail, no driver. Just him, watching Leo with an expression she had no name for. You followed me. Her voice came out flat. I drove past. He looked at her. He talks a lot. He's 4. I know how old he is. The words landed quietly. Clara's jaw tightened. Leo had looked up from the beetle and was now staring at Sunghoon with those unblinking gray eyes. It's the tall man, Leo announced. Yes, Clara said carefully. It is. Leo stood up, brushing his palms on his trousers the exact way Sunghoon did in board meetings, a gesture he'd never been taught. Are you following us? Sunghoon looked down at him. Yes. Leo considered this seriously. Why? Because your mother and I need to talk. Leo looked at Clara. Clara looked at Sunghoon. The evening bus rumbled past without stopping. Leo, Clara said, her voice steady, go sit on the bench and don't move. Leo went. He sat and kept watching. Sunghoon finally turned his head, his silver gray eyes locking onto hers with a piercing, turbulent intensity. 5 years, Naden. You have exactly the length of this moment to tell me why you threw my life into a woodcutter's fire. It's Clara, she whispered, looking away from the raw pain hiding beneath his fury. I told you. I did it to protect him. Protect him from what? Sunghoon's voice cracked, the boardroom mask fracturing for a fraction of a second. From a father who would have given him everything? From a life of absolute privilege? I spent millions hiring private investigators, tearing through Europe, Korea, the US looking for any trace of you, because I thought you were dead. I thought someone had taken you to get to me. Someone to try to take me, Sunghoon. The outburst left her lips before she could stop it. Clara gripped her knees, her breathing suddenly shallow as the ghosts of that 5-year-old Tuesday morning rushed back. Sunghoon went utterly still. The anger in his eyes shifted, sharpening into something dangerous. What are you talking about? Clara looked out to the open, watching the neon lights of Seoul blur past. The morning I left, I didn't just pack my bags and leave. I was on my way to meet you at the office. I had just found out I was pregnant the day before. I was terrified, but I was happy. Then a black van blocked my taxi. She closed her eyes, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper. 2 men dragged me out. They didn't ask for a ransom. They didn't mention your name. They just took my phone, threw me into the back, and drove me to a warehouse near the docks. A man was waiting there. He told me that a bastard child would ruin the succession line. He said if I ever spoke to you again, or if I tried to keep the baby within Korean borders, neither I nor the child would survive the week. Sunghoon's breath hitched. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly the leather groaned. Who was it? Who gave the order? I don't know, Clara said, a tear finally slipping down her cheek.
He wore a mask.
But he had an entry card to the Chaiwon Foundation VIP wing clipped to his belt. He gave me a fake passport, a ticket to London, and told me that if I ever crossed your path again, they would make it look like an accident. I ran, Sunghoon. I ran because I felt a heartbeat inside me, and I knew your world would crush it before it even had a chance to start. The surrounding fell into a deafening, horrific silence. Sunghoon stared at her, the blood draining from his face, as the puzzle pieces began to violently rearrange themselves in his mind. An internal affiliate, the signature secretary Kong, had found on her transfer paperwork. Someone inside his family hadn't helped her hide. They had exiled her under the threat of death. Why didn't you try to reach me from London? Sunghoon asked, his voice thick with a mixture of rage and agonizing guilt. You knew I would have protected you. I would have burned the entire board to the ground for you. And what would have happened to you in the crossfire? Clara countered, turning to face him, her own eyes blazing through her tears. You were completely dependent on the board's approval back then. If you had started a war for an assistant and an unborn child, your uncle would have ousted you within 24 hours. You would have lost your inheritance, your father's legacy, everything. I didn't just run to save Leo, Sunghoon. I stayed silent to save you. Sunghoon leaned his head back against the headrest, closing his eyes as a wave of absolute devastation washed over him. For 5 years, he had hated her memory to keep himself from breaking. He had channeled all his grief into becoming a cold, ruthless executive, believing she had simply grown tired of the corporate shadow and walked away. But she had been living in a self-imposed prison, sacrificing her name, her career, and her safety just to keep his bloodline breathing in the dark. Slowly, Sunghoon reached across the space between them. His hand hovered for a second, trembling, before his fingers gently brushed against the side of her face. Clara flinched slightly at the warmth of his touch, but she didn't pull away. I'm sorry, he whispered, his thumb catching the tear on her cheek. I'm so sorry I let them do this to you. Clara leaned into his palm for a single, fleeting heartbeat before she caught herself and pulled back, pulling her professional walls back up. It doesn't matter now, Sunghoon. It's in the past. I have a life here. Leo has a routine. Please, just leave us alone. If whoever did this realizes you found us, the threat becomes real again. Sunghoon lowered his hand, his expression hardening into an unreadable, terrifying mask of absolute resolve. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the cold, calculated focus of a man who had just found his true north. They won't touch you again, Sunghoon said, his voice dropping to a low, immovable promise. I am not the powerless heir I was 5 years ago. My father is dying, and a war is coming for the chairmanship. But I swear to you, Clara, I am going to find whoever put that fear in your eyes, and I am going to dismantle them piece by piece. He walked towards his already open car, before turning back to look at her. You can stay in your apartment for now to keep up appearances. But from this second onward, you and my son are under my protection. And God help anyone who tries to stand in my way. He reached into his breast pocket and held out a card, no logo, just a number. She didn't take the card. He set it on the bench beside her instead, nodded once at Leo, who nodded back with complete solemnity, and walked back to his car. Clara stared at the card for a long time. Leo appeared at her elbow. Mom. I know. He has the same eyes as me. Her throat tightened. I know, baby. Leo picked up the card and handed it to her. I think you should call him. She knew she had more to say. She called at 11 that night. He picked up on the first ring. Tomorrow, she said. 6 a.m. The cafe on Mapodero. The one with the green awning. I know it. Come alone. I will. A silence stretched between them, long enough that she almost said something real. Then she hung up. In his study, Sunghoon set the phone down on the desk. He looked at the framed photo on the shelf, the one his father had given him years ago, Chairman Cha standing with a young Sunghoon at the original Chaiwon groundbreaking. The man in the photo looked invincible. Down the hall, in the master suite that had felt too large for years, Sunghoon's phone buzzed. His father's night nurse. Vitals dropped again. Doctor recommends family visit tomorrow. He read it twice, then set the phone face down. He had a war assembling on every front, and tomorrow he was going to sit in a cafe with the woman who'd left him and find out why. He didn't sleep. My lovelies, that little boy already knows. And we are only getting started. Subscribe so you don't miss what Clara tells him tomorrow, because trust me, the truth she's been carrying will change everything you think you know about who the real villain is in this story. See you in the next scene. The cafe was almost empty at 6. A woman mopping near the counter. An old man with a newspaper by the window. The smell of roasted barley and something sweet frying in the back. Clara was already there when Sunghoon arrived, both hands wrapped around a coffee cup she hadn't drunk from. She'd chosen the corner table, back to the wall, clear view of the door. Old habit. He sat down across from her without taking his coat off. A waitress appeared. He ordered an Americano. The waitress left. And then it was just the two of them and 5 years of silence sitting between them like a third person at the table. Clara spoke first. I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you, I have no proof of most of it. I have my memory and one name and a threat I received on a phone that I destroyed the same day. Tell me. She set down the cup. 3 weeks before I disappeared, I stayed late to finish the Seoul Tower acquisition files. You were in Busan. The office was empty. She paused. Or I thought it was. She had been walking back from the printer when she heard the voices from the executive conference room. The door hadn't been fully closed. She'd slowed without deciding to. 2 voices. One she didn't recognize. One she did. Vice Chairman Sungmin. She hadn't caught everything. Enough. Shell company names. Transfer figures with too many zeros. A bribery arrangement with someone on the Financial Services Commission. She'd stood in that corridor for 40 seconds before her body remembered how to move. I didn't go to you immediately, she said. I told myself I needed to be sure. I went home, and I wrote down everything I remembered. She looked at her hands. That was my mistake. I waited. Sunghoon hadn't moved. His Americano sat untouched. 2 days later my apartment caught fire. She said it the same way she might report a weather event. The investigator said it was electrical. I knew it wasn't. Then on my way to the office a truck cut my car to the shoulder on the expressway. The driver didn't stop. A beat. My bank account was frozen the next morning. All 3 of them. The old man by the window turned a page of his newspaper. I found out I was pregnant the same week. She finally looked up at him. I was 8 weeks along and someone was trying to kill me, and I had nowhere to go because every person who might help me was connected to your family. Something moved across Sunghoon's face. He held it down. Why didn't you come to me? The question was quiet. Not accusing. Just raw. I was going to. She pulled her cup closer. Then a man found me. At the pharmacy. He knew my name, my real name, not the work ID. He knew the address of my mother's house in New York. He told me someone had a standing alert for my location and that the alert fed directly to his private team. She met Sunghoon's eyes. He said the moment you knew where I was, that person would know within the hour. The cafe hummed quietly around them. He said if I wanted to stay alive, I had to disappear from everyone. Her voice didn't waver, but her thumb pressed hard against the ceramic of her cup. Including you. Sunghoon was still for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. Who was the man? He didn't give me a name. Older. 60s, maybe. Something shifted behind Sunghoon's eyes. He didn't say what he was thinking. I moved 4 times in the first year, Clara continued. I used a friend's cousin's ID to enroll in the foreign medical licensing program. Leo was born in a small hospital in Jeonju under the Vance name. I paid cash. She exhaled slowly. I became unreachable because being reachable meant being dead. The silence after that had weight. Sunghoon looked at her for a long time. The woman across from him had raised a son alone in a city that wasn't hers, under a name that wasn't hers, working a residency on borrowed credentials, and she'd done all of it without a single word of bitterness in her voice. He hated that he understood her. The man who found you at the pharmacy, he said. Describe him again. She did. Slowly.
carefully.
Sunghoon picked up his Americano for the first time and drank. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he was locking something away to deal with later. You said he had a lapel pin. Yes. The senior executive version hasn't been issued since my father redesigned the branding 8 years ago. He set the cup down. The men who still wear the original are all over 60 and report directly to the chairman's office. Clara went very still. Sunghoon's eyes met hers. Not my uncle's office. The chairman's. The cafe felt smaller suddenly. The woman at the counter dropped a spoon and the sound made Clara's shoulders jump. Sunghoon. I'm not saying anything yet. His voice was flat and controlled, the boardroom version of him slamming back into place like armor. I need to verify before I say it out loud. She watched him. Your father is dying. I know what my father is doing. If what you're implying is... I said, I need to verify. He stood, reaching for his wallet. He left enough on the table without counting it. Don't move apartments. Don't change your schedule. And don't tell anyone about this conversation. And Leo? He paused with his hand on the back of the chair. For a moment the armor wasn't quite closed. Keep him close, he said. He walked out into the early morning, the green awning casting a pale shadow across the empty pavement. Clara sat alone with her cold coffee and the weight of a name neither of them had said out loud yet. Chairman Cha Jae-hyun. The dying man. The one person in this entire empire Sunghoon had never once considered a threat. The Han family estate sat nestled in the hills of Songbukdong, a fortress of traditional architecture and modern security. Inside the sprawling sunroom, the air smelled faintly of expensive jasmine tea and ozone from the sleek air purifiers hummed in the corners. Han Seo-rin sat cross-legged on a silk cushion, her porcelain fingers effortlessly guiding a calligraphy brush across a sheet of handmade rice paper. She was the picture of a perfect chaebol daughter, refined, quiet, and completely unbothered by the chaos tearing through the city's financial markets. The sliding glass door clicked open. Her personal assistant, a sharp-featured woman in a tailored gray suit, stepped inside and bowed 90 degrees. The report you requested is complete, Miss Han. Seo-rin didn't stop her brush stroke. The black ink flowed smoothly, forming the character for patience. Did the director's secret detail lead somewhere interesting?
Yes.
To a pediatric resident at Cheongdam International Hospital. A woman named Clara Vance. The assistant placed a tablet on a low mahogany table beside the tea set. But that isn't the anomaly. 5 years ago, her name was Naden. Naden Vance. She was Cha Sung-hoon's primary executive assistant. The brush paused. A single, tiny drop of black ink pooled at the tip, threatening to ruin the pristine paper. Seo-rin slowly set the brush down on its porcelain rest, her dark eyes shifting toward the tablet. Naden, Seo-rin murmured, a cold, beautiful smile touching her lips. The ghost he's been mourning for half a decade. I thought his uncle had taken care of her permanently. She didn't just survive in London, ma'am, the assistant continued, her voice dropping. She returned with a child. A boy named Leo. He is roughly 4.5 years old. Seo-rin picked up the tablet, scrolling through the high-resolution surveillance photographs taken outside the Mapo apartment complex. The images showed Clara walking home in her scrubs, carrying grocery bags, and finally, a telephoto shot of a small boy looking out the third-floor window. When Seo-rin zoomed in on the boy's face, her breath caught. The facial structure was a miniature blueprint of the Cha family line, but it was the eyes that made her blood run cold. Even through a pixelated lens, those striking, luminous silver-gray eyes were unmistakable. They were the exact same eyes that looked back at her from across negotiation tables whenever she met with Sunghoon. A secret heir, Seo-rin whispered, her serene demeanor hardening into something sharp and lethal. Just as Chairman Cha is preparing to draw his last breath. How incredibly inconvenient. Should I inform Director Cha's uncle, Vice Chairman Sungmin? The assistant asked. He has been desperate to find whatever leverage Sunghoon is hiding. No, Seo-rin snapped softly, her eyes never leaving the boy's photograph. Cha Sungmin is a sledgehammer. He thinks with his fists and his bank accounts. If you give a sledgehammer a secret like this, he will smash it until it makes too much noise. Noise invites the board's scrutiny. We need a scalpel. She stood up, her long silk skirt rustling against the floorboards as she walked toward the glass wall overlooking the manicured gardens. Her engagement to Cha Sunghoon was a merger of titans, the perfect alliance to consolidate the Chaiwon Group and the Han corporate empire. She didn't care that Sunghoon didn't love her. Love was a bourgeois luxury. She cared about the crown. She cared about sitting beside him at the pinnacle of the country's economy. A bastard son with a direct genetic claim to the succession line wasn't just a threat to Sunghoon's focus, it was a threat to her future status as the undisputed matriarch of Chaiwon. If Sunghoon discovers the truth, he will protect them with everything he has, Seo-rin reasoned aloud, tapping her manicured nail against the glass. But he hasn't brought them into the main estate yet. That means he's hesitant. He's investigating. She turned back to her assistant, her eyes entirely devoid of warmth. Find the medical lab that handles the executive health screenings for Cheongdam International. The hospital is under the Cha Group Foundation, but the DNA processing is outsourced to a private facility in Gangnam. I want the name of the head technician. Are we planning an extraction, Miss Han? Don't be primitive, Seo-rin chided softly, picking up her teacup and taking a delicate sip. Nature will provide the opportunity. Children get sick. Hospitals require blood work. When the time comes, and Sunghoon inevitably runs a paternity test to confirm what his eyes are telling him, we are going to ensure the science tells a completely different story. She looked back down at the tablet, her gaze fixing on Clara's tired, defiant face. You did well to run 5 years ago, Naden, Seo-rin whispered to the screen. You should have stayed hidden. Because this time, I won't just send you across the ocean. I will make sure Sunghoon hates the very sight of your child. Han Seo-rin arrived at Chaiwon Group headquarters on a Friday morning like she owned the building. She didn't. Not yet. She wore ivory. Always ivory, never white, she'd explained to a magazine once, because white was for brides and she preferred to be remembered as something more permanent than a wedding day. Her driver opened the door. Her assistant held the lobby. 3 of Sunghoon's board members stopped to greet her before she reached the elevator. She was very good at this. Sunghoon was waiting in the executive dining room on the 41st floor, standing at the window with his back to the door. He heard her come in. He didn't turn immediately. You look tired, Seo-rin said, settling into her chair with the ease of someone who had eaten in this room 100 times. Because she had. Your father's condition? Stable for now. He turned and sat across from her. Breakfast was already laid out. She poured her own tea, which she always did, a small performance of self-sufficiency that the press loved when they photographed it at charity brunches. I heard something interesting, she said, lifting her cup. Sunghoon reached for the coffee. You'll need to narrow that down. A woman. At the hospital last week. She watched him over the rim. One of the nurses mentioned it to someone on the fundraising committee. Apparently the chair had quite the dramatic moment in the VIP corridor. The dining room staff moved quietly along the edges of the room. Hospital gossip, Sunghoon said. Probably. She set her cup down. Who was she? A former employee. He cut into his toast. Ran into her by coincidence. Nothing significant. Seo-rin smiled. It reached her eyes perfectly. Of course. She didn't ask again. She moved the conversation smoothly to the foundation gala, then to the board restructuring vote coming in November, then to his father's succession timeline. She was thorough and warm and completely impossible to read, and Sunghoon had sat across from her at enough tables to know that when Seo-rin stopped pulling a thread, it was because she'd already found the other end of it somewhere else. He watched her hands while she talked. Steady, relaxed. She reached for the fruit plate, and her sleeve pulled back slightly, a thin bracelet on her left wrist, rose gold, a small charm he'd seen before. His uncle had the matching cufflinks. He'd noticed it 8 months ago, and filed it away without knowing why. Now he knew. He laughed at something she said. She looked pleased. He refilled her tea. She left at 9:15. Sunghoon stayed at the table after her car pulled away, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. Taewon appeared in the doorway. The bracelet, Sunghoon said. I saw it. Find out when she started wearing it. Pull her private calendar for the last 18 months, not the public one. The real one. He set the cup down. And I want everything on Han Seo-rin's relationship with my uncle. Every dinner. Every phone call his office logged. Every building they've both been in on the same day. Taewon made a note. And the hospital? The boy. Sunghoon was quiet for a moment. Tighten security on the pediatric ward, without flagging it through Central. Use the private contractor. He stood. Nobody approaches that ward without my authorization. Taewon nodded and left. Sunghoon stood alone in the dining room for a moment, looking at the empty chair across from him. Seo-rin had eaten her breakfast with perfect composure and asked exactly one dangerous question, and then stopped. And somewhere across the city, Clara was doing morning rounds with Leo's dinosaur bag hanging on the back of her office door. He needed to move faster. His father was awake when Sunghoon arrived at the hospital that afternoon. Not alert. Awake was different now. Awake meant eyes open, breathing steady, the oxygen tube making its small plastic sound. The room smelled of medication and cut flowers that nobody had the heart to remove. Sunghoon sat in the chair beside the bed. For a long time neither of them spoke. This had become normal in recent weeks. The chairman had spent 68 years filling every room he entered with authority and volume. The silence was new. It sat on him strangely, like a coat that didn't fit. "You look like your mother when you're worried," Jae-hyun said finally, his voice rough and low. "I'm not worried." The old man's mouth pulled slightly. "Liar." Sunghoon looked at his father's hands, the knuckles thicker now, the veins more visible. Hands that had built Chaiwon from a single import company into one of Korea's largest conglomerates. Hands that had signed thousands of documents Sunghoon had never questioned. "I need to ask you something," Sunghoon said. Jae-hyun turned his head slowly. 5 years ago, when Naden disappeared. He kept his voice level. "Did you know anything about what happened to her?" The silence that followed was 2 seconds too long. "She resigned," Jae-hyun said. "She didn't resign. There was no letter. No notice. Her desk was empty on a Tuesday." "People leave, Sunghoon. Especially." A short cough. "Especially when they realize the life they're walking into." "That's not an answer." His father closed his eyes. "She was a distraction. You were about to step into succession. The timing was wrong." "That's still not an answer." Jae-hyun said nothing. Sunghoon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice dropping. "She has a son, father. He has our eyes." The old man's chest rose and fell under the thin hospital blanket. "Did you know?" Another pause. "Longer this time. Get some rest, Sunghoon." His father's voice was barely above a whisper. "You have a board meeting tomorrow." Sunghoon sat back. He looked at his father's face, the gray at his temples, the hollows under his cheekbones, the particular stillness of a man who had made a decision years ago and had been carrying it ever since. He stood up. "I love you," he said. It came out flat and true, the way hard things do. "But I'm going to find out everything, whether you tell me or not." His father didn't answer. Sunghoon walked out. In the corridor, he pressed his back against the wall for 3 seconds, jaw tight, eyes on the ceiling. Then he straightened his coat and walked toward the elevator. Clara texted him that night. "No greeting, no preamble. Leo asked about you again. I don't know what to tell him." Sunghoon read it twice. Then typed back. "Tell him I'm working on something. I'll explain when it's done." A long pause. Then, "He asked if you're dangerous." Sunghoon looked at that for a moment. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were complicated." "That's fair." Another pause. He almost set the phone down. Then her message came through. He said complicated people are usually just scared. He's for Sunghoon. Where does he get this? Sunghoon stared at the message for a long time. Something loosened in his chest, just slightly, just enough to be uncomfortable. "I don't know," he typed back. "But he's right." He set the phone face down on his desk and went back to the file in front of him. Shell companies. Transfer records. And one lapel pin worn by a man who had stood in a pharmacy and saved Clara's life, under orders from somewhere Sunghoon wasn't ready to name yet. He opened a new folder. At the top he wrote one word. Father. Then he started reading. The rain against the Mapo apartment window had a hollow sound now. Inside, the dim light from the street lamp outside highlighted the erratic rise and fall of Leo's chest. He lay curled under a thin blanket, the silver-gray eyes dulled by a high fever, coughing that same quiet, precise cadence that had first frozen Cha Sunghoon in the hospital lobby. Clara sat beside him, her hand pressing a damp cloth to his forehead, her exhaustion almost total. It was just a virus, she had told herself for the last 24 hours. Children get sick. But the cough was deep, and the fever wouldn't break. Sunghoon's final warning from earlier echoed in her ears. "From this second onward, you and my son are under my protection." She had felt the invisible net tighten around them. Unmarked black sedans parked down the street, subtle shadows trailing her on the bus. He was watching. The cough intensified, turning ragged. Clara's hypervigilance snapped. Protection be damned. He's my son first. She couldn't treat this at home. Minutes later, she was bundle-wrapping Leo into a blanket, hoping it would pass as her canvas tote bag, ignoring the shadows that stirred as she ran toward the street to hail a taxi. She would take him to the municipal hospital. Cheongdam International was too risky. No. Director Cha's orders were explicit, Secretary Kong said into his earpiece, watching Clara run from a blocks-away observation post. He shifted the car into gear. Intercept her. She's heading toward City Central Municipal, but we need to ensure the standard of care. Divert her to Gangnam Medical Center. It's cleaner and the genetic lab is automated. The intersection lights changed. The taxi Clara was in didn't make it through. A delivery truck stalled mysteriously, blocking the lane. A second taxi pulled up. Go to Gangnam Medical Center, Kong told the driver over the internal radio. He had already called ahead. Clara arrived at the pristine, glass and steel Gangnam Medical Center with Leo limp in her arms. The emergency staff moved with suspicious speed, bypassing triages she knew normally took hours. They whisked Leo into an observation room. The attending doctor, a different face, thank God, than the Cheongdam staff, quickly assessed him. Severe respiratory infection. We'll start in 4, but standard procedure for pediatric admission requires basic blood work, including genetic screening. Clara hesitated, but the cough was worsening. Yes, fine. Do what you need. She didn't know that the request for genetic screening wasn't standard. Secretary Hanny, operating under Siren's contingency, had authorized it. 30 minutes later, 2 vacuum-sealed vials labeled Sample Elcha left the automated lab intake station and entered the sterile conveyor belt system. Far away from the hospital, inside the high-tech DNA sequencing lab at the Gangnam Medical Genetics Center, the automated system was processing. The large, soundproof sliding glass door clicked open. Han Seo-rin walked in, her footsteps entirely silent on the clinical white floorboards. She wore a tailored white dress with a black coat draped over her shoulders like a regal armor. She didn't look like a woman about to commit medical fraud. She looked like a CEO inspecting a hostile takeover. The head lab technician, a young woman in a lab coat with an ID badge reading J. Lee, flinched as she recognized the Han corporate seal on Seo-rin's jewelry. Is Sample Elcha in the current batch? Seo-rin asked, her voice low and even, devoid of warmth. The technician glanced nervously at a bank of brushed steel laboratory refrigerators. Yes, Miss Han. It's automated sequencing. Automated systems are programmed by humans, Seo-rin chided softly, taking a single, predatory step closer. And humans are programmable by necessity. Seo-rin raised a manicured hand, extending a thick, sealed manila envelope stuffed with cash from beneath her coat. She placed it deliberately on the counter beside J. Lee's computer. J. Lee recoiled slightly, her eyes wide with panic. There is an anomaly in that sample, Technician J. Lee, Seo-rin whispered, her gaze locking onto the technician's face, forcing her submission. The result will show a 0% paternal match to Cha Sunghoon. You understand? J. Lee's breathing turned shallow. If I am discovered. If you refuse, I will discover you, and you don't want to guess what happens when a person gets discovered by me, Seo-rin promised, her expression calculating and cold. She pointed a sharp, accusing finger at the vials visible through a glass viewing window of a machine. But if that result prints correctly, you will never have to work another shift again. You and your family will disappear. If you refuse, I will make you disappear anyway, but with nothing. Seo-rin held the gaze until the technician's shoulders slumped, her resistance crumbling in the face of the overwhelming wealth on the counter. J. Lee reached out, her hand trembling, and picked up the envelope. Good girl, Seo-rin said, the cold, beautiful smile returning. Automated systems are wonderful for plausible deniability. Ensure the sample is lost in processing immediately after the falsification prints. Seo-rin turned on her heel and glided out, leaving the tech alone in the humming, analytical laboratory. The machine buzzed, ready to print the falsified legacy of the boy on the 3rd floor. On Wednesday morning, Sunghoon's phone rang at 7:43. It was Tae-won. The lab was accessed last night. Sunghoon sat up. Lee's lab.
Yes.
Someone pulled the pending result queue. They didn't extract the file. The security log shows incomplete access, like they were interrupted or the credentials timed out.
A pause.
But they were in the system long enough to see the sample was flagged as Cha-affiliated. Sunghoon was already out of bed. Who authorized the access? The credentials belonged to a junior technician named Oh Subin. She submitted a resignation this morning. Her desk was cleared before anyone arrived. He stood in the middle of his bedroom floor, the city gray and rain-heavy through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Find her, he said, quietly. The results came back Thursday. Lee called Clara directly, as arranged. Her voice was careful and professional and gave nothing away. not consistent with paternity. Clara heard the words and sat down on the edge of the consultation table. Say that again. The genetic markers do not support a biological paternal relationship between the submitted samples. She pressed her fingers against her mouth. That's not possible. Dr. Vance, the results are... Run it again. We ran it twice. Standard protocol. She ended the call. For a long moment, she just sat there, the consultation room humming with its ventilation system, the sound of the corridor outside muffled and distant. Her hands were steady, that was the strange part. Her hands were completely steady, and her mind was blank in the particular way it went blank when something was too large to process immediately. She called Sunghoon. He picked up on the second ring. The results came back, she said. I know. Lee called me first. His voice was tight and controlled. Naden. They say you're not his father. There was silence. That is not possible, she said. You know that is not possible. I know. Leo has your eyes.
Leo has your jaw.
Leo does that thing with his hands that you do in meetings that I never even told him. Naden, his voice cut through quietly. I know. I believe you. She exhaled. Something loosened slightly in her chest. Someone got into the result queue before the file was processed, he said. A technician. Gone now. Either someone paid her to access the system or to take the blame. His voice dropped further. The result we received is not the real result. The room felt very cold suddenly. Seo-rin, Clara said. He didn't answer immediately, which was its own answer. I'm filing an emergency motion for an independent retest through a certified external lab, he said. It will take 10 days. In the meantime, a pause. The result is going to leak. What? Whoever accessed that system didn't just tamper with it. They made sure the wrong result would surface publicly. My uncle's media contacts have been quiet all week. His voice was completely flat now, the way it got when he'd already mapped the damage and accepted it. By tomorrow morning this will be in the tabloids. Cha Air's secret child test. Result negative. That's the headline they're building. Clara pressed her back against the wall. They want you discredited before the succession vote, she said. They want me destroyed, he said. She could hear him moving, the sound of his footsteps, a door closing. Keep Leo home tomorrow. Don't take him to the kindergarten. Don't go to the hospital either. I'm sending someone to your building tonight, a woman named Kim Jae, private contractor.
She'll be in a lobby.
She will not approach you unless you need her. Sunghoon. 10 days, he said. I just need 10 days and the real result ends this. She nodded even though he couldn't see her. And Naden. His voice shifted, just slightly, just enough. I'm sorry. That I didn't find you sooner. That I wasn't, he stopped. 10 days. He hung up. Clara sat in her hospital lobby for a moment longer. Then she stood up, straightened her coat, and walked out to finish her rounds. Down the hall, in a private recovery room, Leo was drawing a dragon on the back of a prescription notepad, completely unbothered, his silver-gray eyes tracking the crayon with total focus. She stood in the doorway and watched him for 3 seconds. Then she went back to work. The leak hit the internet at 6:52 the next morning. By 7:15, it had 40,000 views. By 9, it was trending under the tag Chire, with a secondary tag that read Secret Child Them. In a glass-walled office on the 38th floor of a building that shared no name with Chaiwon Group, Han Seo-rin read the coverage on her tablet and drank her morning tea. Her assistant hovered near the door. Clear my afternoon, she said without looking up. Yes, ma'am. And send flowers to Chairman Cha. The white ones. With a card. She turned a page. Something warm. He likes feeling remembered. Her assistant left. Seo-rin set the tablet down and looked out at the city below her. Clean and gray and entirely manageable if you knew which threads to pull. She picked up her phone and typed a single message to a number saved under no name. First phase clean. Proceed with the board contact. She set the phone face down. Finished her tea. My lovely Seo-rin sent flowers to the dying man while burning his son's life down. She is cold. The real DNA result is coming, and when it does, the fallout is going to take someone down completely. Subscribe right now if you aren't already, because the next scene is where Seo-rin's plan starts to crack, and the person who cracks it is the last one you'd expect. See you there. The 10 days felt like 10 years. Sunghoon didn't sleep much. He worked instead, the way he always worked when something was threatening to come apart, which was methodically and without mercy toward anyone including himself. He pulled every thread on Seo-rin's movements. He cross-referenced her private calendar against his uncle's logged office visits. He had Taewon track Oh Subin, the vanished lab technician, through 3 burner phone registrations and 2 cash-only sublets before she surfaced in Ilsan, terrified and willing to talk. She talked. Taewon recorded everything. On day 4, Sunghoon sat in a private meeting room with a retired judge he trusted and laid out what he had so far. The judge listened without interrupting. When Sunghoon finished, the man took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "You'll need the external lab result before any of this moves," he said. Without confirmed paternity, the motive argument collapses. 6 more days. Then in 6 days you'll have something. The judge put his glasses back on. In the meantime, keep the boy invisible. Sunghoon kept the boy invisible. He also, without fully deciding to, started driving past Clara's building at night. Not stopping. Just checking that Kim Jae's car was still parked in the lobby entrance. It always was. On day 6, he texted Clara at 11 p.m. "How is he?" She replied in 2 minutes. "Asleep. He built a fortress out of sofa cushions today and informed me it was impenetrable. Did you test it?" I threw a pillow at it. It held. "Good construction," he said. There was a pause. Then, he named it. He called it the Grey Castle. Sunghoon looked at that for a long moment. Then he set his phone down and went back to his files and didn't examine why his chest felt the way it did. On day 8, Lee called. Not with results. With a problem. "Someone came to the lab today," he said, his voice careful and low. "Not a patient. Not staff." He showed credentials from the health ministry, routine audit. But he spent 40 minutes in the sample storage area, which is not standard for a ministry visit. Did he touch anything? I can't confirm. I was present for most of it, but there was a period where my assistant pulled me out for a call. A pause. I think the call was manufactured. Sunghoon was already reaching for his second phone. "Secure the remaining sample. Lock it under your personal authorization only. Don't log it in the main system." Already done. But Sunghoon, Lee hesitated. If they tamper with a physical sample before the result is certified, they won't. He said it with more certainty than he felt. "I'll have someone there within the hour." He sent 2 men from his private security rotation. Neither of them wore Chaiwon credentials. Neither of them left the lab floor for the next 48 hours. The result came on day 10 at 8 in the morning. Lee delivered it in person. She drove to Chaiwon headquarters, took the executive elevator, and handed Sunghoon a sealed envelope in the presence of Taewon and the retired judge. Sunghoon opened it. 99.97%. He read it twice. Set it down on the desk. "Certified," he said. "Dual lab verification," Lee said. "The second lab doesn't know Chaiwon is involved. The chain of custody is clean." The judge picked up the document. "Read it carefully." Nodded once. Sunghoon leaned back in his chair. For a moment nobody spoke. Lee cleared her throat in an attempt to speak. Then Taewon said, "Oh, Subin's full statement is ready. She confirms Seo-rin's assistant contacted her 6 weeks ago. She has text records." The original tampered result, the judge said, combined with the certified replacement and the technician's testimony, that is enough to file. "Not yet," Sunghoon said. Both men looked at him. "We file when we're ready to finish it completely. Not before." He picked up the certified result and looked at it again. "Seo-rin is one thread. My uncle is the rope. I pull Seo-rin now. He cuts her loose, destroys the evidence connecting them, and walks away clean." He set the document down. "We wait until we have both." The judge nodded slowly. "How long?" "Not long." Sunghoon stood. "But first I need to tell Clara." "It wasn't her, it was me," Dr. Lee said without raising her head, the guilt seemingly eating her up from the inside out. Sunghoon stopped mid-stride. He turned around slowly, the room falling into an immediate, freezing silence. He stared down at the trembling woman. "What did you just say?" "I changed the files," she whispered, her voice cracking as her shoulders shook. "I did it." A flicker of genuine shock crossed Sunghoon's face before it hardened into sheer betrayal. "Why?" "I was terrified," she cried out, finally looking up, her face stained with tears. "The person who came to me, I didn't know what would happen to me if I said no. I didn't have a choice. I brought you into this department, Lee. I funded your research. I always trusted you." "Who was it?" Sunghoon demanded, stepping closer, his presence towering over her. "Name them." Lee squeezed her eyes shut, fiercely shaking her head. "I can't. I won't." A furious, dark energy ignited in Sunghoon's eyes. He slammed his hand down on the mahogany desk, the sharp crack echoing like a gunshot. You should be more scared of me than anyone else right now if you can't name that person. Look at what you did to my family. Sunghoon, calm down. The judge intervened, his deep voice carrying a firm, warning tone. He stepped between the enraged heir and the tech, turning his attention to Jae Lee. Dr. Lee, if you were that terrified, why did you print the real DNA results for Secretary Kong afterward? Why confess now? Jae Lee swallowed hard, looking at the floor as the tears ran unchecked down her face. Because I couldn't rest. I couldn't keep still knowing how good Director Cha has been to me over the years. The guilt was killing me. I couldn't let him live that lie. She wiped her face, her eyes filled with a desperate, haunting finality. I am willing to get arrested. You can take my license, ruin my career, lock me away forever. But if I have to name the person who ordered me to falsify that report, Director Cha might as well kill me right here in this room. Because if I speak, they will do much worse. A collective wave of unease rippled through the office. Taewon exchanged a sharp look with the judge. Everyone in the room was visibly stunned by the sheer, paralyzing terror consuming the woman. Unofficially, they already knew where to look, but this wasn't the fear of a corporate boss or a wealthy socialite like Seo-rin. This was the fear of a monster. Sunghoon's anger cooled into something much more dangerous, a calculating gravity. He softened his voice, stepping back to offer a rare, solemn vow. Speak, Jae Lee. I give you my word. I will protect you. Nothing will happen to you. Jae Lee looked up at him, a tragic, hollow smile touching her lips. It was a look of profound pity. You don't understand, Director Cha, she whispered in Korean, her voice dropping to a chilling register. You don't know how deep this war actually goes. Before he could demand clarity, Taewon signaled the guards. Jae Lee was quietly escorted out of the room, her head bowed, leaving a suffocating, heavy dread hanging in the air behind her. Keep her in surveillance 24/7. Never let her out of your sight. She just became an utmost important variable in this, Sunghoon said. Noted, sir. He drove to her building himself. Kim Jae nodded from the lobby as he walked in. He took the stairs, old habit, harder to intercept, and knocked on her door at 9:45. She opened it in her off-day clothes, hair loose, a coffee mug in her hand. Behind her, Leo was cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by colored pencils and what appeared to be a very serious architectural drawing of a castle. It's done, Sunghoon said. She looked at his face. Read it immediately. Her shoulders dropped about half an inch, the only version of relief she allowed herself. Come in, she said. He stepped inside. It was a small apartment. Clean, warm, the smell of coffee and something that had recently been baked. Drawings on the refrigerator, Leo's, clearly, all bold lines and confident colors with no concern for proportion. A row of small shoes by the door, the largest pair being Clara's worn hospital clogs. Leo looked up from his drawing. You came back, he said. Not surprised. Just noting it. I said I would, Sunghoon said. Leo considered this. Mom said people who say they'll come back don't always. Leo, Clara said quietly. It's true, Leo said, without malice, and went back to his drawing. Sunghoon looked at Clara. She was looking at her coffee mug. 99.97, he said. She closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, they were dry and steady. What happens now? Now I build the rest of the case. He sat down at her small kitchen table without being invited, because standing felt wrong. Seo-rin tampered with the result. I have testimony and the text records. But I'm holding it until I have enough on my uncle to move on both simultaneously. Clara pulled out the chair across from him and sat. How close are you? Close. He looked at her. The shell companies Sungmin ran. I've traced 4 of them back 14 years. There's a 5th one that keeps appearing in the records and then vanishing. Every time I get close to it, the trail goes cold. He paused. The 5th company always surfaces around a Chaiwon acquisition that later went wrong. Properties sold below value. Contracts cancelled without penalty clauses being triggered. Clara was very still. What's the 5th company called? She said slowly. It changes names. But the registration address is always the same building. A commercial property in Uedo. He watched her face. You recognize something. She stood up, went to her bedroom, came back with a phone, not her current one, an older model with a cracked screen and a silicone case worn smooth. She turned it on. It took a long time to boot. I kept this, she said, while they waited. I know I should have destroyed it, but I wrote everything down that night, everything I heard, and I couldn't make myself delete it. The phone loaded. She opened a notes app, found the file, handed it across the table. Sunghoon read it. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened by degrees. The note was dated 5 years ago. It was detailed, names, figures, fragments of conversation reconstructed from memory. At the bottom, underlined twice, Uado. Sungmin said, the Uado account covers it. The other voice said, as always. Sunghoon looked up. You wrote this that night, the same night, before the fire. And you kept it 5 years. I kept it because I knew one day I'd need it.
She met his eyes.
Or you would. He looked back down at the note. The other voice. Not Sungmin's voice. A different one. He thought about his father's silence in the hospital room. The 2 seconds too long. She was a distraction. He thought about the lapel pin. Naden, he said carefully. The other voice in that conference room. You said you didn't recognize it. I didn't. It was low. The door was mostly closed. She had stopped reminding him it wasn't Naden anymore. But you heard enough to write down what he said. Yes. Did it sound old? He kept his voice level. The voice. Was it the voice of an older man? Clara looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes moved across his face, reading him the way she always had, the way that used to unnerve him in meetings because she was always 3 seconds ahead of whatever he was about to say. Yes, she said quietly. The kitchen was very still. From the living room, Leo's pencil scratched steadily across paper. Sunghoon placed the old phone on the table between them. Neither of them touched it. I need to make a call, he said.
He stood,
Walked to the window, stood with his back to her and made the call in a low voice. She didn't try to hear. When he came back to the table, his face was composed and his eyes were not. I need the phone, he said. I need to have the audio of that note, the metadata, the timestamp, certified before I do anything else.
Take it, she said.
He picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then looked at her. You could have used this against me, he said. Years ago. You could have surfaced this and blown everything open from a distance. I didn't want to blow everything open, she said. I wanted Leo to be safe. He nodded once. A small movement, but it carried weight. He will be, Sunghoon said. Leo appeared in the kitchen doorway holding his drawing. He crossed to Sunghoon without preamble and held it up. It was a castle. Gray towers, a large gate, 2 figures standing in front of it. One tall, one small. Both with the same eyes, rendered in silver pencil with the focused accuracy of a child who notices everything. It's the gray castle, Leo said. You can have it. Sunghoon took the drawing, looked at it for a long moment.
Thank you, he said.
His voice was completely even. Leo nodded, satisfied, and went back to the living room. Clara watched Sunghoon fold the drawing carefully and put it in his breast pocket. She looked away before he could see her face. That evening, in a restaurant that didn't take reservations and didn't appear on any business expense reports, Cha Sung-min sat across from Han Seo-rin and cut his steak with the ease of a man who had not yet been told his plan was failing. The board contact is ready to move, Seo-rin said. Good. The paternity story is still running. 3 outlets picked it up this morning. She touched her wine glass. Sunghoon hasn't issued a denial. He can't deny it without confirming the child exists. Exactly. She took a measured sip. By the time he untangles it, the succession vote will be too close to recover. Sungmin set down his knife. And the father? Seo-rin's expression didn't shift. The doctors say 6 weeks. Maybe 8. Then we have time. We have enough, she said. She picked up her wine glass again and looked at it, the deep red catching the candlelight. Outside the restaurant window, Taewon sat in a parked car with a long-range audio recorder and very good patience. He'd been there since they arrived. My lovelies, Taewon was already outside that restaurant. Sunghoon is 3 steps ahead, and they don't even know it yet.
Drop a comment if you felt that.
And Leo gave him the gray castle drawing. I cannot. This child is everything. Subscribe if you haven't, because the next scene is where Sunghoon finally finds out the full truth about his father, and I promise you it is going to hit completely differently than you expect. See you there. The call came from the hospital at 11:15 on a Tuesday night.
Not the night nurse this time.
Dr. Yoon himself, the lead oncologist. His voice was careful in the way doctors' voices got when they were delivering information they wish someone else had to deliver. The chairman is asking for you, he said. He's been asking since this afternoon. I'd come tonight if you can. Sunghoon was already in his coat before the call ended. The VIP wing was quieter at night. The corridor lights dimmed to a softer register, the daytime hum of the hospital replaced by something slower and more careful. Sunghoon walked it alone. No security, shoes quiet on the polished floor. His father was sitting up slightly when he entered. Not much, just enough that he could see the door. He'd clearly been waiting. The room smelled of the white flowers Seo-rin had sent, still on the side table in their tall vase, already starting to turn at the edges. Sunghoon looked at them for a second, then sat down. "You should throw those out," he said. His father looked at the flowers. "She sends them every week." "I know." Jae-hyun turned his head slowly. In the low light he looked older than he had last week, the hollows deeper, the skin thinner. But his eyes were clear. Whatever was taking the rest of him apart had left his eyes alone. "You've been investigating," his father said. "Yes." "How far?" Sunghoon looked at him directly. "Far enough." The old man exhaled, a long, careful breath that seemed to cost him something. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Then I won't make you ask," he said. He talked for 40 minutes. His voice broke twice. Both times he stopped, gathered himself, and continued. He told Sunghoon that he had known about Clara's pregnancy before she disappeared. One of his assistants, loyal to the chairman's office, not to Sunghoon, had intercepted a pharmacy receipt in Clara's name and cross-referenced it. He told Sunghoon that he had panicked, not out of cruelty. He said this carefully, as though he needed Sunghoon to understand the distinction. He had loved Sunghoon completely, and he had believed, with the absolute certainty of a man who had built an empire on control, that Clara would fracture his son's focus at the worst possible moment. Succession. The board restructuring. Sungmin already circling. He had called Sungmin. He had told him only, "The assistant needs to be removed." Quietly. No scandal. He had not said what he meant by removed. He had told himself the ambiguity was not deliberate. Sunghoon sat very still through all of this. Sungmin decided killing her was cleaner, Jae-hyun said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I found out afterward, when the fire happened, and I understood better when I asked him directly." He closed his eyes. There was a long pause. He was using my order as cover for his own ambition. The room was silent except for the oxygen machine. "And you said nothing," Sunghoon said. "No, I did not. For 5 years. She raised my son alone for 5 years, because you made a phone call." Jae-hyun didn't flinch from it. He took it the way he'd clearly decided to take it, without defense, without qualification. "Yes," he said. Sunghoon stood up. He walked to the window, stood with his back to his father, looking out at the city. The lights blurred slightly in the wet glass, Seoul enormous and indifferent, and fully lit at midnight. His father's voice came from behind him, rough and low. "I thought I was protecting the empire." Sunghoon said nothing. "Instead I destroyed my family." A long breath. "I know that's not enough. I know there's nothing I can." "Stop." Sunghoon's voice was quiet, completely controlled. "Don't explain it again. I heard you." Silence. He stood at the window for a long time. Then he said, without turning, "The evidence. You said you have evidence on Sungmin." "In my private safe. The combination is your mother's birthday reversed." Jae-hyun's voice was steadier now, the relief of a man being handed a task. "Everything. The shell companies. The bribery records. His communication logs with the FSC contact." A pause. "There's also a file on Han Seo-rin. She came to me 8 months ago and offered me information about Sungmin in exchange for my support of the engagement. I recorded the conversation without telling her." Sunghoon turned from the window. His father looked at him. The clear eyes, the hollowed face, the man who had built everything and burned the most important part of it. "I recorded it because I knew one day Sunghoon would need a clean path," Jae-hyun said. "Even if I wasn't there to walk it with him." Sunghoon sat back down in the chair beside the bed. He didn't speak for a moment. Neither did his father. Then Sunghoon reached over and placed his hand on top of his father's, the thickened knuckles, the visible veins, the hands that had signed the documents and made the call and built the empire that was now tilting toward collapse. He held it. "I love you," he said, the same way he'd said it last week. Flat and true and painful. His father turned his hand over and gripped his son's with what strength he had left. "I know," Jae-hyun said. "I'm sorry." They sat like that for a long time. Sunghoon left the hospital at 1 in the morning. He sat in his car in the parking structure for 11 minutes without starting the engine. Then he called Clara. It rang 4 times. She picked up, voice rough with sleep. "Sunghoon." "I know everything," he said. "I just came from him." A pause. He heard her sit up. Are you alright? She asked. He almost said yes. The automatic answer. The boardroom answer. No, he said instead. A silence. Not uncomfortable. Just present. Leo had a nightmare earlier, she said quietly after a moment. He woke up and came to my bed and fell asleep in about 30 seconds.
Just like that. Out.
Sunghoon leaned his head back against the seat. He's going to be all right, Clara said. He doesn't know enough to be afraid yet. I know. And you have everything you need now. Yes. Another silence. Then finish it, she said. Her voice was steady and warm and completely certain. Finish it and come home. He didn't answer that last part. But he started the car. 3 floors above the parking structure, in the Chaiwon VIP wing, Chairman Cha Jae-hyun lay in the dark with the oxygen machine, keeping its small rhythm, and the white flowers turning at their edges, and the weight of 5 years finally, partially, set down.
He didn't sleep.
But for the first time in a long time, his eyes were calm. My lovelies, part 1 is done. Clara walked into that hospital 5 years later with a new name, a son with his father's eyes, and every reason to keep running. She stayed anyway. Drop 1 word in the comments that describes her.
Just one.
And if this story did something to you, you already know what to do.
Subscribe.
Part 2 is coming, and I promise you, we are just getting started.